Hey, hello, welcome.
Hello.
My name is Kevin Kohen. This is Eric Radi. This is our live Q&A session. So, really encourage everyone to get some questions teed up. I'll be more than happy to answer them on marine fish, on fish keeping, anything you guys got.
Absolutely, bring him in. We've got the expert here. He's a hard guy to pin down, especially as you get later in the week. So he's ours for an hour.
So we're actually sitting in front of, again, my 120-gallon small polyp stony coral reef aquarium in my office. I keep a variety of SPS corals. On the bottom and in the back, along the whole back wall of the aquarium is what's called Montipora coral. Montipora either grows in an encrusting format or it grows in a plating format. It's a really, really cool, colorful coral for SPS aquariums. I actually like to put this coral ideally down towards the bottom. It does become invasive and start to grow over your rockwork and over acroporas and other corals in the aquarium. This aquarium's been set up since about 2007. It's been obviously grows and I propagate out of this aquarium. Utilized some of this as brood stock for the corals that we offer in our coral farm and aquatic life facility here in Rhinelander, Wisconsin.
Kevin, I got a question here from Mazel Rodriguez. Wants to know what kind of shark can I add to my 500-gallon aquarium?
That's a really good question. So if it's a marine aquarium and it's a 500-gallon aquarium, most sharks aren't really appropriate for home aquariums. However, there are a few types that are. We're really proud to offer right now the captive-bred epaulet shark. A company called Oceans, Reefs, and Aquariums, ORA, in Florida, is an aquaculture company, and they actually produce, they'll actually spawn and then rear epaulet sharks. So that epaulet's a great shark for marine aquariums that are sufficient in size. A 500-gallon aquarium would definitely be conducive to hold this shark. A few other types as well, banded cat sharks and bamboo cat sharks are also nocturnal bottom-dwelling sharks that would work well in an aquarium of the size of 500 gallons. We definitely don't recommend or encourage folks to keep free-swimming sharks like the typical shark you would think of them on a coral reef, like a white tip or black tip reef shark. Even lemon sharks and nurse sharks. We really would strongly discourage anyone from purchasing one of those. They just grow too terribly large for home aquariums.
Yeah, and be sure to check out our Diver's Den deep dive episode of epaulet sharks. We just uploaded that one to the website last weekend.
Yep.
Correct. So you can get a pretty good look at what we actually have in-house. Rachel has a question. Been watching Diver's Den for red spot glass cardinals and haven't seen any. Are these seasonal fish?
They're not seasonal fish, but to procure these fish in large enough quantities to be able to offer them in the Diver's Den has been a challenge over the last few months. So keep checking back. We'll do our best to try to get a few good batches in from our responsible suppliers and condition them up so that we can offer groups of them in the Diver's Den like we have in the past. They're a cardinal fish or a schooling fish. These red spot glass cardinal fish are pretty small. They get about 1.5 to 2 inches, but they do best in groups. And these red spot glass cardinal fish are actually mouth brooders, which is really fascinating for marine aquarists. There's many species of African cichlids on the freshwater side that are actually mouth brooders as well, and cardinal fish. The red spot glass cardinals in marine aquariums are mouth breeders as well. So we'll keep working on it and try real hard to get some in here.
All right, Kevin. Stephen has a question for us. Says, what is the recommended time to leave a reef tank fallow to combat ick?
That's a fantastic question. So there's a lot of different people have different ideas of what duration or what length of time to keep a tank fallow when you've unfortunately introduced Amblyodinium or cryptocarian saltwater ick into a reef tank or velvet. I would suggest if you have fish in your reef tank that do become ill or become sick, that obviously you remove all the fish from the reef aquarium and place them in quarantine, and then leave your aquarium fallow for 90 days. 90 days seems to be the proper duration for that life cycle of Amblyodinium or cryptocarian to die off. if there's no hosts for these parasites to actually attach to the fish's body, they obviously can't survive. You know, the life cycle of these parasites are, when you see spots of ick on the side of your fish, it's actually at the end of its life cycle. Those spots will eventually fall off, and that's where people oftentimes think, wow, my fish are cured, well, I'm in a better position now. And more often than not, that's not the case. These parasites will lay dormant in the bottom of the tank for a few days, then they'll hatch out new larvae, kind of swim around and attach to the fish's gills and the sides of the fish, eventually grow to the point where you'll actually see white dots on the fish. So leaving your tank fallow for 90 days would be my suggestion.
Excellent. And just a quick thank you to Elliott Jackson, says he gets all his fish from LiveAquaria. We really appreciate that. And we just had a meeting with a lot of the staff here in the Coral Farm. We just talked about how everybody's efforts go into the fish you get at home. Everything from how we shop for them to how they get packaged and sent out the door. So thank you so much, Elliott Jackson. Our next question is, please explain the most effective coral feeding procedures. I'm sure that depends on the species.
Definitely. So there's many different types of corals. You know, obviously corals are animals. Most contain zooxanthella algae, and they utilize light for food. However, it's best if you want your corals to be healthy and grow. Things like large polyp stony corals can be target fed. So large polyp stony corals are what we term LPS corals. They're corals that have a hard calcium carbonate skeleton, and they have like fleshy polyp, meaty type polyp that will emerge out of the skeleton. So the best suggestion I would have is to target feed them with a meaty food. We utilize a variety of foods in the coral farm here, from things like copepods, cyclops, small foods like that, small phytoplankton foods, all the way up to things like brine shrimp and mysid shrimp. The best thing to do is turn off the power heads in your tank. Really cut the flow down really well. Introduce a little bit of an attractant, so these corals will actually open up, and that's anything from adding some copepods to adding some brine shrimp. Normally things like Trachophilia brain corals and meat corals and acanthophilia and lobophilia, they'll actually open up. You'll be able to see their polyps, and you'll be able to see their tentacles. And then you can take a syringe and actually target feed those corals, make sure they close up and can ingest the food. And after, say, 15 minutes, you can increase your flow back up and turn back on your flow pumps.
Very good. I've got a question here from Crystal that I'm sure every reef keeper has had to deal with. Her question is, what is the best fish to get rid of hair algae?
So there's many fish that will actually eat macroalgae in a reef aquarium. I prefer to use fish like rabbitfish. Rabbitfish do a really, really good job at target feeding certain types of algae, and even Valonia or bubble algae they'll eat, along with types of hair algae, maybe even some bryopsis. So rabbitfish are great herbivorous fish that can combat some nasty macroalgae that can pop up. So along with the fish, for a natural predator to try to reduce the algae in the tank, manually removing macroalgae before they become invasive is incredibly important as well. So that can be done through the use of a nylon bristle brush. You can siphon out the algae that forms on the rock. So really being aggressive at manually removing the algae, and then utilizing fish like foxfish or rabbitfish to help naturally keep that under control is a great method to use.
All right. Ian just pointed out a question. I'm going to have to grab your iPad.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to jump in here. I'm behind the camera, guys, but I just want to jump in. Mark Callahan's in the chat. Welcome, Mark Callahan. Big fan.
Hey, Mark, Mr. Saltwater Tank TV.
So, yeah, he had a great comment. Got his black tank from Divers In today. Great shape and beautiful. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Thanks, Mark. I know you're a black tang aficionado. I think you really love surgeonfish in general. So, we sincerely appreciate your support and patronage, and we love your saltwater, Mr. Saltwater Tank TV episodes. Keep doing the great work.
So Kevin, let's step back, man. I know when we opened, we were talking about the aquarium behind us. Chris Witt would like to know how big this aquarium is, and what is the age of it.
So this aquarium is a 120-gallon conventional reef aquarium. It's 4 feet long by 2 feet front to back. by 2 feet tall. It's a marine land aquarium. It's got 2 overflow boxes, a sump underneath. It employs a calcium reactor and also some dosing pumps and so forth, and a big protein skimmer. So pretty simple setup. It's been in existence since 2007. So it's been altered many times through the growth of the corals and cutting them back and propagating them. It's always important with any reef aquarium, especially when you're growing SPS corals, is that you can provide enough water flow to all the corals in the aquarium. So as they grow, that becomes challenging in that you have to really, watch the coral growth, see who's growing fast and who maybe is overgrowing another coral, and really change the position of your power heads or even increase the intensity of the water flow pumps in the tank. In this case, oftentimes I have to cut these corals back so that all of the inhabitants within the aquarium can receive the proper amount of water flow.
All right. And we have a question here from Ronald. He wants to know if we're going to see golden angels anytime soon.
So golden angels, that's a little more challenging fish for us to procure. Golden angelfish, Centropyge aurantia, are found in the Indo-Pacific, and those fish are infrequently available. And when they're harvested in very small numbers. And the reason for that is they're actually a very, very cryptic fish. So, they're found in a little bit deeper water, and they're found in habitats that are pretty challenging to dive in and also to harvest in. So when fish are cryptic, it's oftentimes challenging to go down and coax them out of their holes or their habitat so that they can be harvested. But we deal with some very, very responsible suppliers, and as soon as we can get some of these guys in, we'll definitely do that.
All right, very good. Okay, Philip has a question. He has purchased a trio of Bimaculatus anthias from Divers Den a couple of days ago. He's got them in QT, and one anthias is getting bulled from the other one to the point that the fins are shredded and he's starting to show some abrasions on the body. He wants to know if he should separate and what he should do from there.
I would definitely suggest separating them. And first off, thank you for your order. Bimac anthias are awesome fish. They're incredibly beautiful. That's great that you got them in a quarantine aquarium. Oftentimes when you are quarantining some specimens, especially say a trio or a group of fish, it's not uncommon that you might need to segregate off maybe one of the more aggressive fish. I would suggest that you maybe take something like an egg crate divider. That usually works really, really well. If you can go find some egg crate at a hardware store, we usually will take nylon tubing and cut it lengthwise and put like a cap of tubing on each side of the egg crate. You can use that to actually segregate off the more aggressive fish so that the one that's getting challenged or getting bullied can heal up naturally. I would suggest doing some water changes to make sure the water is very clean, and obviously nutritionally, provide some enriched mysid shrimp, and maybe some vitamin C on the mysid shrimp or brine shrimp that you're feeding them in quarantine. But keeping the fish in very pristine water chemistry in quarantine is critical to their success.
All right, we've got a question here from Derek. We in the anemone community have had limited success with some of the harder to keep anemones such as S. giganta and H. magnifica. Can you explain your quarantine procedure, particularly the use of Cipro or other antibiotics?
That's a great question. Magnifica anemones and Ritteri anemones are pretty challenging to keep regardless. They need very high water flow. They need pristine water chemistry. So when we bring anemones like Hadani, Gigantea, Magnifica anemones into the coral farm, we prophylactically medicate them with Cipro. And the reason for that is these anemones are oftentimes exposed to bacterial infection when they arrive to our building. So, it's important that we employ that protocol so that we can kind of do the heavy lifting and do the responsible thing and ensure that the ones that we offer in the Divers Den store on LiveAquaria.com can be placed right into your aquarium. So we'll actually medicate and change water on a daily basis these 3 species of anemones in Cipro for a period of 7 days. From there, we'll place them in quarantine, and if they stay inflated, we'll eventually offer them for sale in the Divers Den store on LiveAquaria. If those anemones start to collapse and expand and contract, we'll run them through another 7-day Cyprio treatment protocol before we get them into the marketplace.
And then we've got a question about lighting for Acroporas, T5, HQI, LED. What's the best in your opinion? I suppose this is species dependent as well.
It is. I've always traditionally been a huge fan of metal halide lamps. Metal halides over the last maybe 10, 15 years have kind of been the staple for SPS coral aquariums. A lot of times it was supplemented in the past with what was called VHO, actinic 03 bulbs. A lot of people these days use T5 supplements from an actinic source. So the hybrid kind of halides T5s works really, really well for me. I'm also a big fan of the new LED lighting technologies. There's many different varieties and types of LEDs in the marketplace now. We really like and enjoy using Ecotech Marine Radion lights here. We've got maybe 60 of them in the coral farm. We use those to light anywhere from our mushrooms and soft corals all the way up to our SPS corals. So to answer your question, I'm still a big metal halide hybrid kind of guy, but we have really great success utilizing Ecotech Marine Radion lights in here in our coral farm. I will point out, however, that if you're going to switch lighting systems from halides to LEDs, that it's really important that you number one, turn down, Ecotech Marine Radions are very, very powerful lights, and even very powerful on SPS coral. So that adaptation process or that duration of time that you're going to employ when you do switch lighting systems, I'd recommend at least 3 to 4 weeks. Turn the intensity down to even 50% on these radions, and make sure the photo period's consistent with the previous lights that you used before. And I think over time, slowly increase that intensity of light over the next 3 weeks, and keep a good eye on the coloration of your corals. Obviously, overlighting corals, they'll bleach out. They'll turn this opaque or pale color, so you really can view the intensity and what that's doing to the animals in the aquarium. So.
And Chad, want to thank you for your recent purchase of your Collins Angels. And he has a question. Kevin wants to know how long they're typically on Divers Den, and maybe we can talk about what it takes to get them onto Divers Den as far as quarantine and in-house procedures.
For Collins Angelfish?
For all of our fish in general.
Yeah, so we bring fish in from responsible suppliers all over the United States. We choose to partner with some strategic partners that share our same goals and values. We bring animals into the coral farm, and they're conditioned prior to offering them for sale. And the process that we have in here varies from species to species in regards to fresh and salt water. But we quarantine and condition these animals for a minimum of 2 weeks in our facility here. There's certain types of fish that have very specific feeding requirements, or maybe are more challenging to adapt to a captive environment. And it's not uncommon for some species to be in our facility here for 2, 3, or 4 months before we even offer them for sale. A good example of that is a fish called Centropyge coloni. They're a deep water cryptic angelfish that's a little bit more challenging to adapt to a captive environment. And we'll have a 30-day minimum conditioning and quarantine for that species right there. So.
And Jared wants to know, what's the best way to eliminate aptasia for good?
So I love utilizing natural sources to eliminate aptasia. Obviously the first thing to do is try to either cook your live rock or segregate your live rock, so you're quarantining that prior to introducing it into your tank and having some aptasia issues. When you do have aptasia issues in your aquarium, again, a natural means of control are things like peppermint shrimp. Caribbean peppermint shrimp are really great at reducing the populations and eventually eliminating the populations of aptasia anemone if they become a nuisance in your aquarium. I also like to use copper-banded butterfly fish. I've got a couple here. There's one in this SPS coral aquarium behind me. Copper-banded butterflies are a little bit more challenging to get eating really well and condition. But if you can buy and procure a healthy copper band, they are a really great target feeder that will consume aptasias and keep them under control in a reef aquarium. However, they will eat feather duster worms. They eat worms in the wild, so you want to make sure that you don't have any feather dusters in your tank or hard tube worms, and just be careful with some tridacna clam. It's not uncommon that some fish will maybe go after, try to pick at tridacnas. I've had no problems in this aquarium here. I've got a blue squamosa clam in this tank that's about 5 inches now, that's grown up from an 1.5 inch specimen, and he's been perfectly fine with the copper band. So.
Then we're going to change gears here a little bit, Kevin. Chris wants to know, what's the best food for spotted head standers?
Boy, the best food for spotted head standers is a varied diet. So like any fish, whether you're conditioning freshwater fish or marine fish, you want to really vary up the diet. Head standers will eat anything from bloodworms to enriched brine shrimp. If you can convert them onto a dry food, a micro pellet food, or even a high quality flake food, if you can do that. So the biggest thing is variation in their diet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We got some 3 spotted head standers in earlier this week, and I was watching them. They kind of go upside down, picking off the bottom. They've been eating bloodworms and brine shrimp. And we got anastomus as well, and their diet is very similar. So Kurt, thank you. Says he loves our company, amazing customer service. You can speak to that a little bit.
Well, thank you very much, Kurt. We really appreciate your support. We have a great team here. There's 28 people that work in this building here in our Coral Farm and Aquatic Life facility, and we have an awesome customer support center next door in our main building here. And the most important thing is our customers. Everything that we do in here revolves around you, our customer, and it's the foundation of our business. So thank you again for your patronage and support.
So I've got somebody from across the globe here. Stefan, thank you for tuning in from Bucharest, Romania. Says he's a beginner. I think there might be a little bit of a language barrier here. He's building a reef tank. He wants to put soft corals in there. I think it says, what's the most important factor for the corals? And again, I'm trying to decipher. I think we've got a little bit of a language barrier here.
So stability is the key. Go slow. That's the most important thing. It takes 6, 8, 10 weeks for an aquarium to actually fully go through the nitrogen cycle and the bio load that's in the aquarium. So go slow, take it easy. Maybe start with some good foundational rock in the aquarium so that you can create a foundation for the corals that you're going to actually keep in the aquarium. When you introduce corals, I'd suggest starting off with pretty hardy stuff, things like zoanthus or mushroom corals, and even some soft corals like signularia or sarcophyton leather corals. But again, go slow is the most important thing. Ensure that you've got stable water chemistry for them. No ammonia, no nitrates, or very low nitrates. You've got good water flow and adequate filtration for them.
Patience is always key. Michael wants to know the best way to get rid of a zoanthid-eating nudibranch in a 29-gallon tank.
Boy, getting rid of zoanthid-eating nudibranch can be a challenge. The first thing is ensure that you're quarantining and dipping all your corals prior to putting them in the aquarium. What I would do is they're nocturnal animals, so zoanthid-eating nudibranch can plague aquariums once they're introduced. So manually removing them at night is a good thing to do. I'd also try to remove some of the zoanthid frags or colonies that you have and actually dip them in say 2 Little Fish's Revive coral cleaner is a great thing to do. Iodine dips work well also, and for a natural means of control, peppermint shrimp can eat these guys, and so can some very small labradorites, some wrasse. So things like 4-line wrasse or 6-line wrasse, those are good animals to try to eradicate zoanthid-eating nudibranch in the home aquarium.
And I love 4-line wrasses. They're one of my favorite. They have great color.
Yeah, 6-line wrasse can be a little more bold over time. So 4-line wrasse usually have a little bit less a less tendency of becoming very, very territorial in a small confined space.
So Andy's got a question, and we've got an answer for you. He says, hey, can I expect captive bred mandarins anytime soon?
Well, you sure can. So right now we actually have captive bred mandarins available on LiveAquaria.com. So if you go to the marine fish tab and then you select captive bred fish, on the, I think it's the third product page, you'll see captive bred mandarins from Biota.
Which we just did a Divers Den deep dive episode on those as well. So you can take a look at those. Ariel wants to know, what salinity do you keep all your fishes in? You can probably explain our 3 different systems we have here.
You bet. So, you know, it's important that when we're providing fish to our valued customers like yourself, that they're actually in the specific gravity or salinity that you maintain in a reef aquarium. So the fish that eventually are offered in our Divers Den store, they're acclimated to a salinity of 1.025. When we first bring fish in the building, we have, again, as Eric was saying, 3 separate systems where that house marine fish. Our inbound quarantine system for marine fish, we keep it a little bit lower salinity, about 1.019. And the reason we do that is because most of our suppliers actually ship us fish at that specific gravity. So, you know, we really want to make sure that we're reducing the stress that's on these animals. So that's why we bring them into a lower salinity environment, and then slowly over time transition them up to 1.025 and offer them for sale when they're ready to go.
All right, Daniel, we got your question. So Daniel is looking for a Xenia that waves like a flag in a hurricane. How can I get that?
So there's a few types of Xenia corals. We offer silver thin branch Xenia here as a certified captive grown coral here in our coral farm, and we also offer white pom-pom Xenia as well, which are 2 great pumping Xenias that, with some moderate flow in the aquarium, will really create some activity and add some movement to the tank.
So going back to our mandarins, Ryan wants to know why we don't offer the option to choose male or female when purchasing species like this. I think we saw them in pairs, correct?
Wait, if you're looking for pairs, we'll offer those in the Divers Den store on liveaquaria.com. However, we offer individual units on LiveAquaria under the captive bred fish category. So feel free during checkout to put in your notes, hey, I'd prefer a male and a female. It's obviously solely dependent on what we actually have in inventory. So, we unfortunately can't order these fish as, we want, 30 males and 30 females. So, we're dependent on our supplier. So.
All right, our next question is from Ryan, and we got a good answer for you. He's wanted a Skeletor eel for what seems like years. Do you guys ever get them anymore?
We do, and we actually have 3 of them, I think, in quarantine right now. Eric, you would know better.
Yeah, I know there was 3. There was probably a medium-sized one, probably 18 to 20 inches, and then we had some smaller ones as well. We could probably take another look out there and maybe somehow shoot you a message on Facebook. But like Kevin said, they're in quarantine, so what, another week or so there yet?
Definitely, yeah. Within a week or 2, keep checking the Divers Den. I'd suggest you sign up for the Divers Den email alerts. That way you'll be notified via email of when a Skeletor Eel is going to be offered that day on the website.
All right, so David wants to know, he's only been in the hobby he's into the hobby a year. David, I apologize, I left my readers at home. I'm pushing 50, so I'm getting to that age. Can't seem to get the hard corals that grow over the rock like brain coral. So I don't know if he's talking about encrusting. Brain coral's a little different than encrusting. Says his zoas, polys, and mushrooms and hammers are growing great. He uses LED lighting.
Mm-hmm. So if you're having troubles with some corals, like Eric was saying, most brain corals like lobophilia or trachophilia, those are solitary corals that, they're best if you attach their base to a rock, or with trachophilias, you actually put them down in the sand bed of your aquarium. So they're not really gonna grow and encrust pretty quickly. Things like Favia or Favites brain corals, however, those are hard corals that will encrust over rockwork over time. I'd really focus your efforts on ensuring that you have, number one, stable alkalinity in your aquarium, proper levels of calcium, and the proper magnesium level in the aquarium as well. So, hard corals really need that stable alkalinity around 8 to 10 DKH, calcium levels of 420 to say 450, and magnesium levels of around 1300. So providing those three stable parameters is really going to enable you to be able to quickly grow some of these encrusting hard corals. But they do grow pretty slow. So compared to zoanthus and mushrooms and softies, things like Favia and Favites brain corals do grow much slower.
So Kevin, our next question is about polyclads. Have them in the tank. Are there animals that eat them? So how do I remove them without tearing the reef tank apart?
Yeah, so it's not uncommon that reef tanks will, over time, maybe you'll introduce some pests, right? Red planaria and other pests are infrequently introduced into the aquarium.
Flatworms.
So, exactly, they're like flatworms. So,
okay.
A natural means of control would be things like dragonets. Mandarins will eat these planaria and so forth. You can also manually remove them. I'd suggest that you increase the water flow in your aquarium a little bit and change some more water. The cleaner the water is, and manually extracting these animals, I think you're going to have you're going to be that much further forward. So,
Alex wants to know, would we add pods to a new tank?
Would you add pods to a new tank? So, depending on how new the tank is, if I were to set up a reef tank today and put the gravel and rock work in the tank and fill it up with water and turn the pumps on, I'd let it stabilize, for at least 72 hours before you're gonna, put some pods into the aquarium to try to get them to populate. If that's a means that you're gonna employ to cycle the aquarium. So.
And Jash has a question about Goniopora not opening.
So that's common sometimes. Goniopora can be sensitive to number one, lighting intensities. Oftentimes these corals are found in relatively shallow water, however, in pretty turbid environments where, there's, again, it's shallow water, so you think they're getting a, pretty intense lighting source. However, it's in a very nutrient-rich, turbid area where there's, maybe cloudiness or poor visibility. So, depending on the lighting intensity, you might want to adjust the lighting intensity and even maybe consider adjusting some of the flow in the aquarium. If it's positioned in a place that maybe has too strong of water flow, it will inhibit the coral from actually opening up properly. Third, most importantly, really sit back and observe the behavior in your aquarium. There may be some fish in your aquarium that could be, infrequently picking on the coral as well, so which will obviously inhibit it from opening up properly.
And Bo would like to know the importance of water changes. How frequently should you do them in an established reef tank?
So I'm a huge proponent of water changes, and the reason I say that is by performing water changes, say 20% every week. That's what I like to that's the means that I utilize here in my office. At a minimum, a 30% water change once a month would be ideal. But small water changes more frequently are going to really help stabilize and keep in balance the ratio of elements into the aquarium. And it's also a good way of extracting things from and diluting things from the aquarium, such as the oils from your hands or maybe lotions and things like that. So small water changes frequently is if you can do that is definitely the best way to go about tending to your reef tank, in my opinion.
And Mike wants to know when he might see some more high-end zoanthids.
Some more high-end zoanthus. So we again grow a variety of corals in our Coral Farm and Aquatic Life facility here in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. I would strongly encourage you to check our aquaculture coral section in our Divers Den store, where we add several hundred specimens a day, Monday through Friday, to the Divers Den. And so keep checking back in the aquaculture section there. We frequently add a lot of different types of zoanthus to that section of the Divers Den store.
Sorry, I'm looking for a question. I've been going back and forth, so I'm kind of going over the same thing. Yes, we do freshwater dip our zoanthids when they come in, correct?
We do. Yeah, we'll freshwater dip all the zoanthus rocks that come into our facility here. And we also utilize hydrogen peroxide as a dip as well, a diluted form of hydrogen peroxide. And we'll repeatedly dip zoanthus over the course of a week. We'll let them, after the dip, we'll let them come back out, get adapted back and open back up, and then we'll go ahead and dip them again. But we dip all our zoos about 3 times before they're even offered for sale.
And David wants to know, he says he can only grow soft corals. Is this most likely a lighting problem?
It's hard to say. If you've tried to grow other types of corals and you're just not having success, normally it revolves back to starting with stable water chemistry. Hard corals require very, very stable alkalinity and the proper ratio of magnesium and calcium in the water. So, I suggest that you perform a thorough water test. Also check your phosphate and nitrate levels to see how high those are. Soft corals are much more adaptable than hard corals or SPS corals like what's behind me. So starting with water chemistry, if that's off the table and all your parameters are in check, water flow is an important criteria in a reef aquarium. And then lastly, the lighting intensity. Again, most corals are pretty highly adaptable, so starting with that basic water chemistry is a good first step.
And Jules would like to know, aside from manual removal, what are the best way to deal with vermitid snails?
Yeah, vermitid snails are a challenge. I actually have them in this aquarium right behind me. And what I do is I'll actually take basically it's like an ice pick and actually manually break them out of the rockwork and the coral that's in the aquarium. I haven't found any really good fish that will solely eat vermitid snails in a reef aquarium. Some people have said, things like Halochlores wrasse are good wrasse that you can introduce that will help control these, but I personally have not had any luck without manually removing them.
Joe's got a good question. What factors change the price of fish?
It's a great question. Pricing of fish is highly dependent, number one, on seasonality. It's obviously supply and demand affects price, but most importantly, the origin or location of harvest for these fish plays a huge part in the price point of fish. As you can imagine, in the marine ornamentals industry, we're basically shipping bags of water around the world. So fish that come from really, really far away destinations like the Maldives or Mauritius or Madagascar, that's a long haul on an international air cargo carrier. And that's pricey. So the freight space is challenging at times, but again, we're shipping bags of water around the world. So that's the biggest influencer of pricing on marine fish. It's the desirability and how hard to procure these fish are, the point of origin for the fish, and obviously supply and demand as well. So.
And Mike is looking for a young batfish. Any species in particular?
Well, actually, we choose not to offer batfish, and the reason we choose not to offer batfish is because they oftentimes grow too large for most home aquariums. So it's my personal opinion that we have a responsibility as aquarists in this community that fish that we term tank busters that just grow way too large for conventional home aquariums. We choose not to offer, and that would include, Pennatus batfish, Tierra batfish, and Ovicularis batfish. So we feel those fish are best left in public aquariums and in the ocean as well.
All right, Kevin, I want you to screen this question.
So yes, LiveAquaria, we're owned by Petco. Petco is a great company, provides a lot of great leadership and support for the LiveAquaria division of Petco. The acquisition was about in 2015, and again, awesome support from the Petco enterprise. We have a lot of great partners that I have the pleasure of working with that are super hardcore dedicated reef aquarists, just like all of us in here, and we really could not be where we are today without the support and backing of Petco.
And Travis Foster wants to know, and I think I know the answer to this question. What is your personal favorite fish?
Boy, I think it changes daily. No, my personal favorite fish is an Apsis femininus, or the blue striped tamarin wrasse, and I actually have one in this aquarium right here. And this aquarium's a 180 gallon tank. It's got 2 permanent dividers. So there's a smaller male that's in this tank, and there's actually a really nice male right here. I've had this guy for a little over a year now. But the reason I like an Apsis femininus and the reason I find them fascinating is they have an incredible behavior. They're constantly hunting, exploring, turning over rocks to find little micro crustaceans. But most importantly, I find their behavior fascinating because these fish are hermaphroditic, and they'll actually start out as juveniles or females, and they're this bright yellow fish with blue stripes down the sides of their body running horizontally, where the males will actually, the most dominant fish in the harem, that is a female, will transition into a functioning male, and it will exhibit completely different colorations than the female. So, an Apsis femininus, the blue striped tamarin wrasse, is definitely my favorite fish.
Earl's got a great question here. It wants to know, do you run different reactors on your personal systems, and do you use Kalkwasser or a calcium reactor or 2-part dosing?
I actually do all of them. The aquarium behind me is actually run with a dosing pump. The aquarium to my right here actually employs a calcium reactor to provide stable alkalinity and calcium and other elements to the corals. And we dose Kalkwasser. And we have a show tank out in our coral farm here. It's a 300 gallon deep dimension tank. We have a calcium reactor on it, and we'll dose calcium hydroxide at night, which is Kalkwasser. Our main coral rows as well in our facility behind me, we employ calcium reactors and an automated dosing pump for Kalkwasser at night based off the pH. So, it's not uncommon through the photosynthesis process of corals that the pH will tend to drop in the evening. So we'll offset that by dosing Kalkwasser into the rows and into our show tank and so forth.
And Kevin Tracy has been on our email list for 18 months, and he's curious about Heniochus. He hasn't seen any schooling bannerfish.
Yeah, schooling bannerfish are tough. Heniochus diphurides are challenging to procure. Whenever we can get from one of our responsible suppliers a batch of these fish, we'll definitely try to procure them. But they are more challenging for us to bring into this building or even offer on the LiveAquaria website. So.
Ariel wants to know if we get any of our fish from the Philippines.
We do. We get fish from all over the world. We buy fish, primarily we try to focus on short supply chain areas, which are countries of origin like Fiji and Tonga, Tahiti in the South Pacific, New Caledonia, Micronesia. We also try to really focus our efforts on fish from the Indian Ocean, from the Maldives, and from Sri Lanka. But we do also buy fish from the Philippines and Indonesia, and we partner with some very responsible suppliers that, again, understand the supply chain, have partnered with these collectors and exporters over the course of 20 or 30 years, and have very strong relationships with these exporters as well as with the collectors.
And Kevin, maybe you can speak on behalf of the gentleman that works with the people in Fiji that actually shows them how to responsibly collect and harvest the corals. I forget his name, I apologize.
Yeah, there's, in really short supply chain regions, there's, oftentimes, a handful of collectors, maybe 10 collectors, and there's one person that runs the export station. And those are the areas, again, that we try to focus on because, number one, it's low impact to the natural resource. It employs folks in the countries of origin where they're harvesting, and they're properly trained and they're provided with the proper equipment. So, from a safety standpoint, with diving to a proper way to harvest animals or marine ornamentals with the utilization of the right nets and the right equipment.
So my next question is from Jim Irwin. Maybe you can let us know specifically what type of female wrasse you're looking for. He seems to think we have mostly male wrasses. He wants to know if we have female wrasses.
We do. It really depends on genus of wrasse that you're looking for. So I would assume that you're probably referring to things like Cirrolabrus, the fairy wrasse, or Paracalenus, the flasher wrasse. More often than not, these collectors will actually target the largest, most colorful males. But in our facility here, we'll definitely try to bring in females as well, so that we can offer them in groups. Things like Halochlores wrasse, chorus wrasse, those we offer in females or males, both. But again, I think you're probably referring to fairy or flasher wrasse.
Hey Phil, thanks for joining us from Bay Area, California. He wants to know how critical an RO unit is, especially in an SPS dominant tank and in good water conditions. How long should it take a fresh cut acro to fully encrust on a plug? And maybe you can explain how we create our water here in the facility.
Sure. I feel the utilization of reverse osmosis is really, really important. Even if you live in areas where you're on a well and you've got very pure water, utilizing an RO machine will actually help remove some impurities from the water that can impede coral growth, especially phosphate and nitrate. So in our facility here, we have a very sophisticated water purification system. Our inbound water runs through some gigantic carbon tanks. They'll run through a water conditioner, a conventional water conditioner, and then from there it'll run through some really commercial 3-foot tall reverse osmosis membranes to strip out some of those impurities, and then the water then runs through a deionization process where we use a mixture of cation anion resin that will remove the rest of the total dissolved solids from the water. So our goal is to produce water of 0 TDS, which means total dissolved solids, and that gives us a really good foundation. So when we utilize our LiveAquaria professional reef salt to mix up our salt water that we utilize in our facility here, that it's very pure and it won't impede coral growth. The second part of your question was how do corals encrust, or how long does it take? And it's really species dependent, it's water chemistry dependent, it's lighting dependent. But normally for an Acropora coral in our facility here that will propagate, if it's a quick growing species, it's not uncommon for that coral to fully encrust in say 3 weeks time.
So we got a couple hellos here. Steve from Current USA. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
KK in the loop, no pun intended. I gotta say hi to my girls back in Neroli. What up, AB? And I just lost my train of thought here. I had a good question. Steve, when's the Bluetooth controller coming out? That would be for Steve.
So Steve's from Current USA. Current's got an awesome system called the Loop system. We actually have it set up on a tank that's in the office adjacent to mine. And it's a really great product. We love supporting Current. We believe in the product. And the Loop system is an integrated system where the lighting and the flow pumps and the return pump are all controllable. So I really encourage everybody, if you're interested in the Loop system, that you check out Current's website. You check out the LiveAquaria.com website under supplies, and you can read all about the Current Loop system.
And Steve Simmons has a very good question. If Divers Den items are quarantined, is it really necessary to quarantine again at home?
That's a fantastic question, and I would say yes. So it's impossible, almost impossible, for anyone to guarantee with 100% certainty that a fish, coral, or invertebrate may not transfer disease into your aquarium. Whenever fishes are stressed, their obviously immune system becomes slightly compromised, and they can be susceptible to contracting pathogens, whether it's bacteria or parasitic infections. So we again go through a very rigorous process in here from a conditioning and quarantine standpoint. But regardless, even if you're buying fish from your next door neighbor, I would strongly consider that you quarantine every animal, every fish, coral, or invertebrate that you bring into your home. You want to really observe the fish's behavior, number one, and try to understand the fish's behavior before you put it into your display tank. And number two, you want to make sure that it's accustomed to prepared foods, it understands you are the caregiver and you're going to be feeding the fish. And it also reduces the likelihood of transmitting disease to your existing display. So QT everything.
Absolutely. Dana wants to know what our thoughts are on matted filefish for aptasia control. Do you find them to be reef safe?
So Archaeicthes tomentosus is the aptasia-eating filefish, and we've had great luck with utilizing that fish for aptasia control as well. However, I would a word of caution that if they take a liking to maybe one of your favorite zoanthus colonies, or they take a liking to maybe some other sessile corals in your aquarium, you really need to be observant of their behavior and be ready to remove them if again they're going after your next favorite zoo that you're growing in your tank. So
Austin wants to know what our preferred food for LPS corals is.
For large polyp stony corals, our preferred food is actually PE cyclops and brine shrimp mixed together. Cyclops is a great food. It's actually a very small particulate food. It's a zooplankton, and it's a great attractant. I think corals can react well. They'll start to open up when you put that in the aquarium water and the water flow stream. It will basically, like I said, cause these LPS corals to open up, and then you can take larger foods like PE mysid shrimp, Hikari mysid shrimp, and brine shrimp, and target feed your LPS corals.
Then he also wanted to know if we could think of anything other than emerald crabs to eat bubble algae.
So emerald crabs are the number one animal to help consume Valonia or bubble algae in a reef aquarium. Also, there's some rabbitfish will eat, foxface and rabbitfish will eat bubble algae as well. So, it really depends on how big or how invasive, or overrun your aquarium is. But, the utilization of emerald crabs, which I've got a bunch of them in this tank behind me, as well as some rabbitfish and foxface will work well as also.
So Jim's got another good question for us. Can we email LiveAquaria if we're looking for a fish that does not show up very often? How often? I think he's just wondering if he can email us. Is there a way to contact us if he's looking for anything in particular? Maybe we can let him know about email notifications.
Yeah, we've got on our website we have the functionality where you can sign up for email notifications for fish that are not in stock. There's also an area for species suggestions in the Diver's Den store. So there's some functionality in there that you can enter in the name, the common name, and the scientific name, and some notes of what you're looking for, and that'll be submitted to our team here at LiveAquaria.
This gentleman's got a cool name, Antonio Cisneros. How you doing? He wants to know why do my torches keep dying off in my tank when everything else seems to be doing fine and thrive except for torches? Do you guys know what might be happening?
So depending on what kind of corals that are actually thriving in your tank, some of the stony corals actually can be damaged pretty easily. So we struggle at times as well with euphyllia corals in our building. Again, regardless of the care that you've taken, these corals have very delicate internal skeleton structures, and if they manually hit against something, or they're damaged, that actually will slowly compromise them over time, and they just can't recover from that, and they'll crash out in your tank. If you get a healthy specimen, however, that's thriving in a store, or it's off the Diver's Den store on LiveAquaria, I'd really start by trying to photo adapting the coral, placing it towards the bottom of the aquarium, ensuring that you have proper water flow. Euphyllia corals don't like direct, strong water flow. They like if you're utilizing, say, Vortec power heads, kind of in a pulse mode, so that you're creating a gentle wave action in the tank, would be best for them. So.
And maybe you can also speak to the fact that maybe there are some aggressive corals nearby.
That's true as well. Where corals are oftentimes not compatible with different genus, so they'll have sweeper tentacles that come out at night. So yeah, depending on where you're placing the torch corals that you're trying to procure into your tank, make sure you give them room around, especially with species of corals that are dissimilar to them. I'd also suggest observing the corals at night after your lights go off. You'll see most often LPS corals will throw out their sweeper tentacles at night. So that's a good way that you can see if you've got things like a cardinalfish that's close to it that have really long sweeper tentacles, that you can move that coral into a different position or a different spot in your tank.
Then Mike is having trouble with BTA. It only opens in blue lights.
So bulb tip anemones, they'll adapt over time. I'd suggest you maybe ramp down your lights a little bit, or turn down the intensity of light so that the anemone can photo adapt to the spectrum and intensity of light on your tank over time. Bulb tip anemones as well, like some water flow, so ensure that they're positioned in a place where there's some water movement around them. And then I'd definitely try to target feed your anemone. Turn off your flow pumps or turn them down, and then manually feed the anemone, and try to do that every day so that the anemone will get accustomed to feeding in the display, and then it will adjust more easily to the lighting intensity and duration.
Israel, I'm going to try and cipher through your question here. I think your question is about salinity in a reef tank, and it looks like your salinity is at 1.029. Kevin, maybe you can speak to what we keep our salinity at here and what high salinity, how that could be detrimental to a reef aquarium.
Yeah, so a lot of the elements that are in seawater in our reef tanks are solely dependent, meaning in their ratio on the density of the water, how much salt's in the water. So when you keep reef tanks at say 1.029, normally the concentrations of alkalinity and magnesium and calcium are very elevated in the tank. So I'd suggest over time, maybe over the course of 3 or 4 days, lowering your salinity down into the 35 parts per thousand, 1.0255 range would be ideal, in my opinion, for these stony and soft corals.
All right, Chris, I'm getting to you. I wasn't sure if you were able to catch up on some of our quarantine discussion we had earlier. Thank you for your recent purchase. He ordered one of our golden morays off at Divers Den. Those are beautiful eels. I've been coveting them all week. And again, he wants us to speak on behalf of the quarantine. I'm sure those eels were in there at least 2 weeks, correct?
Definitely. Eels we keep obviously separate from the other fish because they're carnivorous and they'll eat small fishes. But yeah, all the eels in this building are quarantined for a minimum of 2 weeks. We actually will hand feed with tweezers. We'll use things like silver sides and krill, some chopped shrimp, to ensure that these eels are eating very aggressively before we offer them for sale.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, I think we've got to wrap it up here. We're coming up on about 1 hour. That's our threshold today. We're very busy here. Not that we don't want to answer your questions. And I apologize. Next time I'll have my readers. And until next time, feed, siphon, repeat. What are your pearls of wisdom?
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us today. It was super fun. We're going to host these live Q&A sessions frequently. So keep checking out our Facebook page and tails up. Keep changing water.
Thanks for watching.